Hey everyone. I would say each of your names. I guess I could. Pallas, Erin, Jared, and Joe. Hi, how are you guys?
Hi.
Doing
Just wave.
good.
You guys know this is like a
Everybody's
podcast.
doing great.
They don't know that
Everyone's
you
being super
waved.
humble.
Yeah, we have a lot of Virgo. We have a lot of Virgo energy in here. It's a lot of like quiet, humble writer energy in here today. So yeah, I am so excited to talk to all of you guys about compatibility and CUSP, our app that we've worked on together. And yeah, just going to get into it. It's Valentine's Day, or at least this is airing on Valentine's Day. I don't know when you're listening to it, but we're recording this in late January. We're still in the thick of Mercury and Venus retrograde. So just know that that's happening, and just for any future things that could occur during this episode. But yeah, we're gonna talk love and compatibility with you guys. But before we get into it, let's do some intros. If you're comfortable with sharing your SMR, we love to hear it. And just tell us about your practice. So why don't you start, Joe?
Oh, okay. Hello everyone. I'm Joe O'Neill. I am a Leo sun, Cancer moon, and Leo rising. Uh, let's see a little about my practice. I am a consulting astrologer and I love to write weird astrology stuff. Um, I'm super into the idea of narrative astrology and storytelling with astrology based in like super traditional Hellenistic texts. So that's kind of what I do. Um, yeah, and I don't know, that's it for now.
Awesome. Erin.
Hi, y'all. I'm Erin, also known as E.T. Shipley. I'm also a consulting astrologer. I use she, her pronouns. I live, work, tend community on the lands of the Popaluchum, Amamutsan, Awaswas, and Ohlone peoples, colonially known as Santa Cruz, California. And I mostly consult with clients right here from this spot in front of my computer. I have like a window that opens up to this beautiful pine tree and a couple of wild oaks. And most of my astrology is technically rooted in Hellenistic, like traditional Western techniques. And a lot of what I do with astrology is work with people who are experiencing the impact of collapse of systems, environmental collapse, systems of oppression, and figuring out a way to sort of stay with the trouble, or stay with the challenge, or witness the experiences that ripple out from everything that we're seeing in our world today. And I mostly, at least in the last year or so, I've shifted my practice to be working with clients for an extended period of time. So like 3 or 6 month periods in order to work with people through transits, or to work with a specific area of their life, or to navigate a specifically difficult thing that they're going through.
Awesome. And Erin and I know each other. I forgot to say with Joe, so I'm going to come back to you, Joe. But Erin and I met on this lovely app called Tinder. She was one of my lucky swipes way back when, 2018, I think. And we just like immediately started nerding out about astrology.
It was so good. It was so good. My phone was blowing up in the best way.
The reason, like, what caught my eye, your main picture was in front of this place called Media Noche in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, when I was in San Francisco a couple of weeks ago, I didn't go there. I ordered from there because like it was a bad time to be outside in the middle. Yeah. But anyway, yeah, I was like, oh, full circle. Last time I was here, it was like I did a shoot there, and then like 2 months after the shoot, that's when I like saw Erin in front of the place on Tinder. And then, yeah, we just like started nerding out hardcore over astrology.
So Mercury.
One
And
of
you were
my
hand modeling
earliest
too, right?
Yeah, I was hand modeling. Yeah, there was yeah, and then we finally got to meet up right before you moved out to the Bay, and we've just been friends ever since.
And now we're West Coasters, both
and now
of
we're
us.
and I'm going to see you again very soon, so I'm excited.
I'm so excited.
And I forgot to mention, yeah, Joe and I think we just connected over Twitter, right? Until we met in person at NORAC 2019. Oh my God. I just had a moment. What year is it? Yeah. Yeah. And I just remember having like a really lovely like moment with you somewhere in that hotel, like in the lobby or something. And we were both just like, I love you.
Oh my God, yes. You know what I remember most about like meeting you at NORWAC finally after being mutuals for a while? It was Friday and we were both wearing green shirts, obviously, for Venus. And I was like, hang on a second, do you want to see something? And I like pulled down my like waistline a little bit and I had on like emerald green underwear too. And you were like, oh my God, same. And you did the same thing.
I forgot about
so
that.
And I was like, I love astrologers so much.
Exactly. That's what I mean when I'm like, no, astrologers are the best people. Like that's why all my friends are astrologers.
100%.
Yeah, that was so much fun. Fingers crossed NORAC 2022. I don't know if it's gonna, it definitely is not gonna rival 2019, but it'll be nice. It'll be nice to be in person again.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Thank you both for being here. And Jared, welcome back. Actually, I shouldn't say welcome back because the episode that you're on hasn't come out yet.
Yeah.
So Jared's in another episode to come. I think it's actually the next episode. Right? Yeah, it is. You're on 2 episodes in a row. Wow. Okay.
Thanks.
So no, it's all good. Jared, welcome back to the astrology show. Yeah, what's your SMR? What do you do?
Yeah, so I do astrology under the pseudonym of Mercurious George, which really was just, a silly joke for me when I set up a Twitter account a few years back, and it's sort of haphazardly turned into a whole thing, and I sort of half embrace it now. But my name is Jared, and I am a Libra sun, Libra moon, Virgo rising. And I've been studying astrology on and off with varying degrees of seriousness since who knows when, the mid-aughts, 2000s, for anybody who doesn't know that term. And I got much more serious about it in 2018, and I have been, just connecting with the astrology world, with astrologers, and sort of making peace with it, to be honest, over the past, 4 years or so. And studying, I studied with Austin Coppock and finally started doing consultations for the general public once the pandemic started, and I was just I had a lot of idle time and idle hands. So I do consultations on and off. It's kind of a part-time thing for me. So probably when this episode airs, I will have my calendar open. And my foundations are mostly quote unquote traditional astrology, Hellenistic and otherwise, but I don't necessarily consider myself like a Hellenistic astrologer because I think that's a pretty strict term. And I definitely have learned a lot from, all sorts of different schools of thought. And I don't have much else to say about what I do, but I'm very happy to be here.
Happy to have you. Thank you. And yeah, we met over on Twitter, and then we met in person because you came to LA this last summer.
Whatever.
It was summer. It
wasn't anything anymore.
Yeah, we had fun.
Yeah. I was supposed to go to NORWAC 2020, so I was very devastated that didn't happen because I had really psyched myself up for it. And meeting, presumably would have met most of you in person then. So yeah, I've haven't been able to meet as many people in person as I would, probably would have if not for the whole thing.
Pandemic type of thing. Yeah.
The
We
whole
did get
thing
to have
happened
we did have a tea party. I think last time I saw you, we did a tea party
in New York. Yeah.
in New York, which is really fun with my bestie, Teddy. Anyway, yes, happy to have you here. And last but not least, Pallas. Hi. You want to
Hi,
share
Kirah.
with us?
Hi, everyone. I'm Pallas. I'm a Virgo sun. I'm one of the Virgos, Sag moon rising, but with a Jupiter in Aquarius. So it rounds things out a little bit. I'm a writer, an astrologer, and a consultant. And I've been seeing clients since, God, for like almost for 6 years now, which feels like a very long time in pandemic time. My astrology journey started when I was really young, primarily in kind of like Rudyard psychological stuff. And then it kind of mixed with some more traditional stuff when I found Skyscript, that was like early 2010s. And then, yeah, through going to NORWAC and meeting more people internationally, I've melded like a few different kinds. There's some like evolutionary stuff in there, a lot of Hellenistic stuff. Yeah. And so I practice what I call it like relational astrology, which isn't so much about relationships specifically. It's about how we relate to the world, the chart as like an art of placemaking and relating. I don't know. Yeah. Glad to be here with all of you beautiful people.
So happy to have you. Yeah, and we'll have you on another episode this season that I'm super excited to record soon. And we met also on Twitter, right? Or no?
We met at NORWAC.
At NORWAC, that's right.
Yeah, because I wasn't really on Twitter. And then after NORWAC 2019, I was like, okay, I guess I have to get on Twitter to keep in touch with all these amazing people I met. So,
yeah, no, that was, I remember we were walking to like the mall, to get food.
Yeah.
And we like were having this really awesome conversation about 12th house Saturn. You're kind of like prepping me for my Saturn return. Yeah, wow.
I was talking about Rob Hand, I think I remember regaling you with some story about Rob Hand's 12th house Saturn. It's like,
oh yeah.
It's a good club.
Beautiful. And speaking of Saturn, we talked about Saturn on the astrology show together.
Yeah, it was Zamboni.
Season 1. Yeah, it was Zamboni.
So good.
Who I'm also recording with soon.
I think
great. Next week too. Yeah, for another episode. And Erin was on the show before too to talk about the 6th and 12th houses with Kirsten, which was really fun as well. So happy to have some of you back. Happy to have some of you here for the first. Joe, it's your first time, right?
It's my first time on the astrology show. Thank you so much.
Welcome. I just had, after you guys were saying your SMRs, I had this realization that 3 of you have like double signs in your SMR, which is really interesting. But more importantly, all 4 of you have your chart ruler in fixed signs. And so I'm like, that's, I think what this vibe is it's so just like calm and like steady. And I'm just like the mutable bitch, like buzzing around. You guys are all just like so chill and like consistent. So anyway, that's the vibe I'm getting right now. It might be a lot of Virgo energy, but I think it's the fixed bitch vibe. And I'm assuming like you guys all know each other through Twitter, through life. Yeah, Erin and Pallas, you guys definitely met. And Joe, you guys were all interacted at 2019 NORWAC. And everyone's interacted with Jared on Twitter.
Yeah, I think Joe and I met even before that at UAC.
Oh, nice.
Oh God, you
kind of passing each other, but like, yeah, we were definitely sort of everyone outside smoking in front of the hotels, like Gemini
yeah.
bread pointing out all the stars. Like,
Yes. Man, there were so many people there. I met so many people that I had to like re-meet at Norwalk, and I was like, look, I'm so sorry. I met so many people at UAC.
it was wild.
So many that everyone thought I was at UAC. People were like, oh yeah. And I'm like, I was not there. I did not ever go to a UAC. But anyway, let's get into it. So I brought you all here because you're all some of our writers for CUSP, the app that I launched in late October. I always forget that our app's a Scorpio, because the Sag rising with Venus in Sag on the ascendant is like so loud to me when I think about CUSP. But yeah, we are a little 12th house Scorpio sun app as well. But anyway,
I mean, talk about a bonding experience behind the scenes.
Yes, I'm so happy I got you guys all on Slack. But yeah, so just to kind of talk a little bit about CUSP, it's an app I launched with my co-founder Nick in October 2021. And it's essentially a daily horoscope app and a compatibility app, all kind of focused on love. And a big part of CUSP is that it's not just about romantic love and sex, even, although that's definitely part of it. It's more about living in a way where love is emphasized and at the forefront of your life in all ways, and connection in all ways, and all the different ways that it can manifest love with yourself, love with your friends, your partners, the hottie, that you want to fuck, like all types of love. And I think just specifically there is a lot of self-love focus with CUSP, and it's just kind of happened that way. But yeah, so we launched it in October, and then we decided we wanted to like add more depth to the compatibility report. So Jared was actually part of the first round of core content writing, and if you're an air sign, if you have an air sign, sun, moon, or Venus, sun or Venus, sorry, not moon, sun or Venus, that is written by Jared. And a big chunk of our compatibility reports, some of that writing is also written by Jared. And also, who's not here with us today, one, because Geneva is going to be on 2 other episodes this season, and because Charm couldn't make it, but Charm Taurus also wrote a big chunk of the core content for CUSP in both rounds of writing. And Geneva Drama also wrote a big chunk of writing as well. All of those like beautiful earth and water sign, sun and Venus overviews are written by her. And yeah, just really nourishing content from both Charm and Geneva as well. And then, when we decided we wanted to expand and write more for the compatibility reports, I was like, bet, because I know a bunch of great writers to reach out to. And I'm so excited to have you guys. So Pallas, Erin, and Joe came on. Charm also did more writing, and Jared transitioned into editing, which was like a huge help for me because my Mercury's in Sag and I love editing, but my Mercury is busy as fuck and doing too many things. And so Jared coming in with your like, Mercury and 3rd house Mercury and Scorpio, like in that Virgo expertise, it just worked out so well. So yeah, you guys did such a great job. And if you haven't downloaded CUSP yet, you should do that right now. You can, if you're on your phone, you can still exit, you can still listen and hop over to the App Store, the Google Play Store, whatever it's called. We are on both iOS and Android, right? I said that right. And yeah, I'm sorry, I'm staring at the clock because it's 4:44:44. And I just put on a bunch of Jupiter materia, so I just had to shout out Joe. But anyway, download the app. You're going to get these incredibly written daily horoscopes that are not like your typical horoscopes. You're not going to get the whole like, send that text to your crush today, like, or he might be the one, like, tell him how you feel, like that, that type of generic type of stuff. It's also not going to, I don't know what that other app does with their with their notifications that can just not be, they can be a little toxic, that's kind of like completely anti what CUSP is about. We're giving you, I think our horoscopes really, it's like a little nugget of wisdom you can kind of carry with you throughout your day. And they're just so well written by amazing astrologers. We have Isaiah. I'm gonna butcher their last name. Does anyone know how to I'm gonna butcher it without looking at it, but Isaiah, the Elysian Aquarius on Instagram and all the socials. They write for us, Natalie Nicole, and Amber J are all some of our horoscope writers. So we just have like a lot of really great astrologers working on the app. And also the cool thing about CUSP is that like we're telling you who our astrologers are. We're not being secretive about who these people are, because a lot of times for a lot of apps, they're not actual astrologers writing the content. A lot of times it's writers, copywriters. So anyway, when it came to compatibility reports, it's hard to figure out like which direction to go in. And so I think we came up with a really good system. And when I finally figured that out, I was like, all right, who are we going to get to write these things? And I'm just so happy with the end product. So I guess I want to first ask you guys about like your opinions of the app and yeah, just like your experience writing this type of content. I don't know who wants to start. Erin, you start.
It's so funny that you asked that, because I remember, so is it okay if we talk about like the elements that we were focusing on? Mm-hmm. So I wrote Venus compatibility reports for both romance and sex. So I was looking at the relationship between different people's Venuses. So for like a month and a half, 2 months, just like really deep in thinking about how people relate to one another from the aspect of what Venus is about, which is like values and exchange and reciprocity and pleasure. So many other things, pleasure, desire.
Yeah.
And for me, the experience was like, it was a lot of content in a very short amount of time, but I sort of saw it as like Venus remediation, as like this giant prayer and like labor of love to Venus. And so much of my experience was about like reflecting on all of the different ways that people can support each other and struggle in relationships, and trying to be both like educational, like warning, and also inspiring people to relate on different levels to their partners based on what I was seeing in their Venus signs. And I think had I not known that you were paying attention to more than just Venus compatibility, I think I would have been maybe resistant to writing what I wrote, because if you're just looking at Venus compatibility, that can be like a huge reduction of how people might relate to one another, what struggles they might come up against in a relationship, and what things might benefit them. There's so many elements that you can look at in a chart. And so it was nice to dive into this very specific thing, knowing that it was going to be rounded out by other people's interpretations of different parts of relationships. So it just, honestly, it felt like a big prayer, and it felt like an act of love. And I will admit, I was totally burnt out and exhausted by the end. But like reflecting on them and going into the app now and seeing my compatibility with other people, and like also seeing how I maybe wrote something based on a relationship that I have with someone, and then looking at how that applies to a relationship with a different person, and seeing how that is true of other relationships as well, is just another experience of how astrology can be so affirming.
Yeah, I mean, I experienced that firsthand. I feel like with with you and what you wrote about one of the combinations, and it happens to be the same combination that you and your fiance have.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is so spot on.
And I was like, oh, that's funny because I modeled that after my partner and I.
Yeah, I mean, it's wild. And honestly, it definitely, all the content definitely reads as like a prayer, to Venus. That's very evident in everything you wrote. So yeah, when in your sexual and romantic compatibility reports, you'll find content written by Erin around your Venus signs, and you may or may not know based on what's written that we're talking about your Venus signs, but for some that will be obvious, but regardless, you'll know that we're talking about Venus for both sexual and romantic compatibility. I didn't say that. So yeah, you can do we have like 3 different options for compatibility reports now. So you can see your compatibility with someone on a friendship level. You can see it on a romantic level, and then also on a sexual level. And we basically are using a couple different metrics to generate those type of reports. But yeah, all of you can tell when you read it that it was written by real practicing astrologers who who work with people and who like witness these dynamics and see it play out. And yeah, I'm still floored by the level of writing you guys did. And I'm sure Jared is too, because you really went through all of it. You combed through all of it, and you always had a lot of nice things to say as well. Yeah, Jared, do you have any thoughts? Oh, did you want to say something else, Erin?
I think it's just important to note that it's not just so if you're looking at romance and sex, we didn't just look at Venus compatibility. We also looked at, I think it was like 5th house compatibility and like 7th house compatibility. So there were like multiple elements going into each compatibility report so that we could get a sense, like a very well-rounded sense of how people might relate. And you can tell maybe that the style of writing is a little bit different from astrologer to astrologer. And I love that we had some creative freedom in our styles and we didn't have to like tamper or hone our way of thinking about something to match a particular style. I think actually there's definitely consistency throughout, but at the same time, everybody got to add their own little flair, which I really appreciated.
Yeah. I feel like, I mean, the main consistency, honestly, was like, we all have a foundation. Our astrology is rooted in a similar tradition. And so I think that really helps when it comes to like, we all can like, we're speaking the same dialect of astrology, basically. And I think that really helps. Yeah, Jared, do you have thoughts about the editing process and just the app in general? And yeah, because you were writing and editing.
So I kind of have I kind of came to it through 2 different avenues simultaneously. In terms of writing content, I was in the first round of writing. We were just focused on sun sign compatibility. When you first asked me to do it, I had to work through some like fear and reluctance about like getting into this zone of astrology writing, because I've spent so much of the past however many years just kind of like getting really into the weeds about all sorts of complexities about transits and timing systems and houses and rulership and all this stuff. And so pulling it back to what felt like
back to surface, basically.
Back to the surface stuff, and also back to stuff where you can't look at the whole chart, right?
Yeah.
You can only look at this. You're only be able to write about this one thing. And I wasn't sure I could do it, first of all. So, but once I decided to do so, I feel like part of my sort of approach to it, which I think was implicit for all of us, was to come into it with the understanding that people are going to have, first of all this incredibly wide range and variety of kinds of relationships. And people are going to have relationships with whoever the hell they want to have relationships with. And it is not our job to dissuade them from doing so, because no matter what their compatibility is, they're going to learn something. They're going to have an interesting experience. They're going to surpass our expectations, or it's going to go horribly wrong in ways that we couldn't foresee. Not because astrology doesn't work, but because, first of all, you're only writing about one pairing of placements. And two, just because that's what life is like, and I think that if anything, being practicing astrologers, all of us, and doing consultations and hearing about people's lives and seeing it through this filter, right, of their charts, I feel like that's I'm losing my train of thought, but that's one of the main things that you learn is like everybody can get along with everybody. And so anyway, I just that was loomed large in my mind as far as my attitude for how I approached it, and not necessarily to always give everything an overly positive, put it through rose-colored glasses or anything, but to acknowledge that people make choices and find wisdom and learning and all sorts of stuff in all sorts of combinations, and there's always something to every relationship, right? The other thing that I had in my mind while I was working on it was I wanted to never forget that people who use this app might come into it with a very sort of looking for fun, right? But they also might take it totally seriously, and you don't know from who's reading it. You don't know what their attitude is when they're approaching it. So I wanted to, anything that I contributed to it, I wanted to do with an awareness that this writing could actually affect real relationships in terms of the expectations and understandings that people internalize and carry into their interactions. And so that to me feels like no small thing, and then later as being in the role of editing other people's writing, I was able to really see how everybody approached it and read everything very closely. And it was clear that all that stuff was universal for everybody who contributed to the app, that all of us thought about that, even when we didn't talk about it all very explicitly, that those attitudes I feel like were pretty much true for all of us. And especially, taking it seriously enough that people could be influenced by what we were writing, and to do that with some degree of delicacy while still having some fun and being loose and allowing ourselves to be inspired. Because when you're writing, if you've never done it, if you just sit down and you're like, I'm going to write 78 reports times 2 or whatever, it's a lot of writing. You have to just keep going. You have to keep coming up with something to say. It has to be you have to find the meeting point between, technical knowledge applied and what comes through for you, because you're still just a writer, and like any other kind of writing, you have to have some kind of inspiration for what you're saying.
Yeah, that's also well said. I mean, especially, excuse me, the piece around I just, it's hard to be an astrologer, especially a practicing astrologer, especially as deep in it as all of us are, and know the intricacies of how chart placements manifest, and how the most subtle things can change the way a Mars sign, manifests, or all that. And then to sort of pull out and look at things so archetypically and so macro, basically, in a sense, is hard. It's a hard thing to do. And it's definitely a mercurial feat in translating, because it's not just translating astrology, astrological speak into into like layman's terms, but it's also translating like astrological speak into like archetypal like big picture. We're talking sun signs, Venus signs, moon signs, but then and that's scary, I think, for a lot of us, because it's like we know the intricacies. But I mean, at least me, I came at this from having been a writer for a few different apps, and having done a lot of the same type of work before. And I think I already sort of realized how it can work. I've done it before, but then talking to you guys about it and feeling that resistance again, I'm like, oh yeah, I totally get it. I see why this is kind of a scary thing to take on. But it fucking works still. Like, that's the beauty of astrology. And that's the beauty of being a good writer and a good translator, is that there is still going to be those parts of the archetype. Like, the archetypes just like live within us, so it's still going to work and it's still going to manifest. And I think definitely for some of you, I had to do a little convincing that it would work, but I'm glad you all said yes, because you did such amazing work. Yeah, Joe, how about you? What are your thoughts on it?
Oh my goodness. Excuse me. So well articulated, everything that Erin and Jared said. I was nodding along so big because I agree so much. To sort of tag on to what Erin was saying, I love how well-rounded this app is. I love that it's not just Venus compatibility or just Sun compatibility. It's friendship, romance, and sex with, at least 3 different approaches to that kind of compatibility based on the individual's charts themselves. And even if that's not mentioned in the reports, you can really see it build out, and it gives this variety for people to look at. And I really appreciate it. I love this app so much. I have to say. It has nailed so many of my like relationships and friendships. And I'm like, I wrote for this app and it is exposing me. Like, I don't understand how this works.
I know, that's how I
Except
feel,
I
because
do.
I didn't write for it. So like every time I do one, I'm like, oh my God, this is so good. This is like, I get to have that like exciting thing, and it's like my app, which is cool.
Yes. Everyone just has done such a fantastic job. I'm so blown away by everyone's contributions. But yes, let's see. So I wrote the moon compatibility for the friendship reports, and I really relate to what Jared said about having to kind of like scale back a little bit, because I'm a very technical astrologer. Like, love me that Hellenistic tech. Like, it doesn't, like I have plenty of other influences as well, so it's not super rigid, but I have 3 planets in Virgo, including Mercury. So it's kind of my jam. But I think my first experience writing for something like this was when I was ghostwriting daily horoscopes, like dailies for all 12 signs, with absolutely just awful deadlines. Like, I remember I had to do the first batch in like 8 days. Like, it was
God.
I literally don't know how I survived. But at the very beginning of my practice and sort of my studies, I had this kind of almost negative view of things like horoscopes or like reports, because I thought it wasn't as real as like looking at a natal chart. And boy, was I humbled, because you all are so right. Like, this stuff still works. And it's like the astrology gets bigger to encompass something smaller, like in words. Like, it's very difficult to explain, but I'm always really moved by how profound this kind of writing can be, and what you can really draw out and allow to come through when you have a limited amount of words to say something in. So I really enjoyed doing this kind of writing again for the moon signs. And I have a Cancer moon, so I'm like a very lunar person. It's in my 12th house, but it's my sect light. So that's a whole thing. And I really enjoyed just kind of really sinking into that. I related to what you said too, Erin, about it kind of feeling like a devotion. For me, it was it was a lot doing moon stuff and having a 12th house moon. I was literally just in my apartment, just writing constantly. I like didn't leave. But I like that kind of stuff. And what's interesting too, that I observed while I was writing was my own experience of like my moon placement. It's very pure moon because it's the moon in its domicile, but being in the 12th house, and having a lot of 12th house focus in my client work and in my writing, part of that is about vulnerability and like what it really means to feel safe, and what that really takes when it's difficult. So part of what I tried to draw on is, getting out of the Virgo brain a little bit and being like, yes, of course, like I don't know what the rest of the chart is, but these moon signs, like the rulers of these signs, the elements and modalities of these signs, all inherently have a body sense or a felt sense understanding of what safety means and what care means. And it was really interesting to sink into that. And I think I often approach it from what would make this moon sign feel uncomfortable and what would make this moon sign feel comfortable. And like, how could these people comfort each other? And being able to be vulnerable with other people it takes so much courage and it takes so much willingness to like hold that space and be present with people. And it's something I think about so much because it's, a challenge for me and such a gift when it's available and comes naturally and is nourishing, that it was really wonderful to like sit with all these sign pairings and really kind of dig into how they might interact. And yeah, I really enjoyed it overall. I was also very burned out at the end. I started just like screaming about moon stuff on Twitter by the end of it. That was my moon swings.
That's what
I forgot about that. Yeah, that makes sense. That's where that tweet series came from.
Yep. I mean, there was more than that. That was like the week Venus stationed retrograde, and it was like a whole other thing. But yeah, I love moon stuff. It was such an honor to write the moon compatibility for your app.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Such an honor to have you. And again, such beautiful writing. And yeah, the moon sign stuff is really important. I mean, if we had all the time in the world, I would like also include moon sign compatibility in the romance reports too. But I really wanted to make sure that was a big piece of the friendship compatibility reports, because I feel like, yeah, moon sign compatibility like really hits. The way like moon synastry, it's so important in the ways that we relate to one another, and again like feel comfortable. And that's kind of what friendship's about, like being able to be comfortable and trust another person.
And the beauty of that too is that even if you're in like a romantic partnership with someone, you can still check your friendship compatibility. Like, I don't know why you wouldn't. Like, I want my partner to also be like one of my best friends. So it's nice to be able to like still kind of get a sense of what that aspect of partnership looks like.
Definitely. Yeah. Pallas, dying to hear your thoughts.
Generally, I'm not much of an app person really, but CUSP has been so much fun to read and play around with. Like, not only just the amazing team of writers you've put together, just overall the dailies and these folks, like, is so good. So the quality of it's really amazing, but the ability to see the report, I want to echo what folks have been saying about the tricky business between it seeming superficial, but then also recognizing the depth of it. I really felt that writing mine, and even entering into it. Like, I don't necessarily, like, I'm not known as a horoscope writer. That's not really what people know me for. And so doing this, I was a little nervous. I was like, can I even do this? And so I like did one and sent it off to a friend and was like, is this right? Before I actually agreed to it. And I'll explain what I actually did for the app, because it's a bit odd compared
I was
to
gonna
some of these other
say.
ones. Yeah. So, but there's something about the recognition, like what Jared said, the recognition that this will actually impact how people relate to each other, right? And understanding like the gravity of it, and just really reckoning with how popular it is now for people to reflect on themselves using astrology, right? That's just, it's just so common at this point. But being able to be like, no, what this actually means is that this is how we relate to each other, right? And like astrology gives us that, maybe even more so than it gives us like self-reflection tools or like event prediction, right? There's an ability to see how our experiences align and differ. And I think it's so beautiful. So I feel like CUSP really speaks to that way of understanding the world. So, which relates to what I did, which so I wrote what people will see as the third paragraph on their friendship and romance reports. And so we don't say what it is, but what
no,
it
you can
is,
say.
it's based on your seventh house. So it's sort of like a rising sign compatibility, except it is predominantly based on the sign on your seventh house and the planet that rules your seventh house. And so, I mean, I'm also one of these Virgos, right? So I had a very I like printed out bi-wheels of every pairing. It was a whole production. Oh yeah.
That makes me so happy.
I love that so much.
Okay, I'm gonna try and really be brief about the technical stuff, just because like you're all nerds and you'll love it. Yes. So what I did, because it's like novel, right? Like I hadn't really seen anyone do this before, like let alone with an app, right? So it was so challenging and like fun. And I think Charm worked in a similar way with what Charm gave to the
Charm
app
did
as well.
The fifth house compatibility.
Yeah.
Skills. Yeah.
So it was like, okay, so what I did, I'll try and be brief. What I did was I took I looked at the seventh house and the ruler of the seventh house. And then I looked at where that planet, well, for one, the other houses that planet ruled in the person's chart. And then I looked at the houses in the other person's chart that planet ruled.
Wow, Pallas. Holy
Whoa.
shit.
Like I was under, so yeah.
Mind-blowing.
Thank you. Because I share this, and I'm sure coming from like a Hellenistic background as well, right? It's like the ruler of your seventh house often actually signifies your literal partner, right? And so if we take that, we're seeing how that planet's energy then expresses itself in our partner's life, because that's probably in some way where we will come to them or they will come to us. So in dealing with the houses, and especially when we're dealing with an angle, I really understand the angles, right? Like the cross to be, in terms of relationship, right? To be where we come to the world and where the world comes to us. And like every house in the chart, like they contain everything in the world, every experience, every object, like it's all there, right? And so this idea that when we're talking about house-based compatibility, right, which is the seventh house or the fifth house, we're really looking at how our relationships enter into the world in some way, or how our relationships relate to the entire rest of our lives. And so it was really freeing, and this like echoes one thing that Erin said, is it was really freeing to know that my colleagues were like covering the moon, right? They were like covering our emotional bodies, we're covering our Venus values stuff. And then, so I was free to be like, okay, so what brings these people together? Like what actually in their lives, the circumstances bring these people together, and how does their relationship impact the world? Right. And so I come to it through, and so I did some like, I reread care work. I read some like transformative justice stuff, right? So like so I was in this mode of like, okay, yeah, it's an app. What are we going to do with it? It's like we're impacting people's relationships. It's like, what do relationships do? It's like, I think especially friendships, right? It's like they change the world. Like this is how it happens. And so being able to like contribute to this app and do all that, there was there's more technical. I had like a whole list of the technical stuff. But yeah, it was really blessed to be able to write like this. Yeah, it was super fun.
We're all so blessed to have all of your writing in it. I'm proud of myself for putting together this team, because I just couldn't ask for a better team of people who really take this seriously. Yeah, I mean, I really appreciate that about all of you, is that like you really, took this seriously, as this can affect people's relationships, their view of themselves. And I feel like it's really important that people take that into account when they are choosing the type of content, the astrology content that they're consuming, the type of apps that they're using every day. It's really nice to know that the people writing this content like feel this way, really, really care about how you're receiving it. So thank you all so much for contributing, and also to Charm and Geneva, and also Taylor Ursula, who is also going to be on two other episodes this season. So that's another reason why I didn't invite her to this one. But Taylor wrote our moon and rising sign overviews, as well as our Mercury and Mars overviews, which should be on the app by the time it will be on the app by the time this comes out. This should be on really soon, actually. So also shout out to Taylor, has been doing amazing writing for our love overviews. So that's another part of the app. You get your daily horoscopes, you get these amazing compatibility reports, and then you can also read about your placements, and sort of in the lens of how those placements relate to love and relationships and just connection in general. And they're all just so well written. So proud. Another cool thing about the app, which is some of our newer features, is you can react to the compatibility reports. You can talk to people, you can chat, with who you're doing your report with. So there's a nice like connection piece there as well. And we're going to have even more sort of like reaction and commenting sort of features coming out definitely by the time this airs. So that's another exciting part of the app. It's cool ways to connect with other people and see how they're feeling about their compatibility reports or whatever's happening in the sky. So again, it's all about connection. And the CUSP birth chart has this beautiful Juno Venus conjunction in Sag, like right on the ascendant. And I did root that chart to my chart. The midheaven is exactly on top of my natal Venus. So I mean, it's just a lovely app, and it's beautiful, right? It's like very aesthetically pleasing as well, which helps. My co-founder has Venus in Capricorn, and he actually headed the aesthetic part of it. Believe it or not, I didn't have anything to do with it. so he also has a good eye, which I think he's also a Pisces, which I think Pisces are just naturally aesthetic. But anyway, what else? I'm curious about like your reactions to using the app and like the compatibility reports, especially. I mean, I know most of you are partnered. I'm curious what it was like when you like looked at your compatibility with your partner for the first time. Or, I mean, and if you're not partnered, anyone else that you might be interested in, anyone else that you did a report with. Erin, you go first. I see you smiling.
It's funny, my partner's in the other room, and I'm just thinking about she's like not a phone person, and so I've been like, get on CUSP like a couple times, and she hasn't done it yet.
She's
and
like, nah.
I noticed the other day that there was a way to put in somebody's birth information if you have it. And I like resisted because I really wanted to see it like with her on the app. So I'm waiting on that one.
TBD.
But I did actually look at our compatibility, Kirah.
Oh, cute.
And I was like, oh, hot. It was also really nice. It was just funny because, you know, we met on Tinder and like we never dated, but it was just like, it was very affirming thinking about like rooming with you at Norwalk and just like all of the experiences that we've had sharing space together. I was like, oh yeah, this is spot on. And
I
then
also have a lot of the same placements as your fiance, just saying.
You do. You do have a lot of the same placements as my fiance. Oh boy. So yeah, I've mostly looked at like compatibility with friends and just felt very like affirmed in my friendships. And like there are a couple of people, Joe's actually one of them. Like I looked at our compatibility and I was like, oh, I really want to be friends, like closer friends with Joe, because we're like mostly acquaintances. And I was like, oh, there's so much like good like Jupiter Mercury stuff happening. I feel like yeah, it's been kind of fun. I feel a little bit like on that fine line between like creepy and curious. Like looking at my compatibility with other people. And one thing that I love about CUSP is just how fun it is. And it's been really nice. I have a couple of roommates from New York who recently got on CUSP and added me. And I remember one of them had like a compatibility book. I don't know what book it was, but I think it was like a sexual compatibility. I feel like it had a red cover.
Sextrology or something.
Yeah. And I remember looking at that book with them when I lived with them. And now just thinking about how CUSP is like a much more expansive version of that and like well-rounded version of that book, and how like fun it would have been to like be in. And now I can shoot them a text message and be like, oh my God, this is so like spot on. But that was really sweet to see them pop on.
Awesome. How about you, Pallas?
Well, I was just thinking it was probably love signs. I think that is like read the Goodman's book.
Yeah.
But one of
both. No, I think
it was probably both, because both of them are like super astro curious, and there were definitely a few like astrology books that weren't mine that were floating around that house.
So one of my favorite things about it is the just like blatant gender openness about the app. Like it's just not even a thing. Yeah. It feels so freeing, because so much compatibility stuff historically in astro is so gendered
and so monogamous too. It's like so hetero. Yeah. It's so hetero mono. It's so totally. I didn't even think about that, but that's such a good point. Yeah, our app is super non-gender. It's like kind of agender in that way.
Yeah, and it just allows us to like be ourselves in it, which I feel like is beautiful.
Did other people also use they them pronouns in writing compatibility reports?
Because I think that was just across the board. Yeah,
I did like without even questioning it, and it was so freeing.
Yeah, that's such a good point.
Yeah, the rapport with my partner is very good. Very good. I will say the Sun and the Venus are just like spot on. Really beautiful. One of the favorite, from the writing end of things, it was like talking about them as a prayer. It's like I definitely treated, especially the friendship ones, as like these little sort of like secret love letters to like all my friends. And so like afterwards I was like sending them to people and just being like, here, look at this. And then some of them I actually wrote, and there's one I'm thinking of specifically where it's like I actually wrote it with people in mind who I like wanted to be friends, like better friends with. That's and adorable. Like, so now one of them knows that, the other one I don't think knows that I wrote the horoscope about them. But it was like the friendship ones I really focused on like how to be better friends to each other, you know? And I just like, and it can sometimes be hard and like a little awkward to make, especially in like post-pandemic world, right? Where we're so much online, it can be hard to really like make that jump into like more intimate communication. And so part of what I love about the app is that ability to react and like message people on your report, because I feel like it kind of gives you this opportunity to sort of like bump between like, oh, we're just mutuals, we've been mutuals for 5 years, and like, but we've never, you know, we're not going to DM because that's so like serious and there's boundaries and stuff, but this little like cusp thing. But also it's not such a big deal that if someone doesn't respond, it's not like, it's not going to be horrible, right? So I think that there's something really beautiful there. And yeah,
Did
they've
your
tracked. It's
partner,
weird that they track.
did your partner like read it as well? What was
Yeah,
their
well,
reaction?
actually, I downloaded CUSP when you first did the first release of the report.
Okay.
And so I got them to download it too. And so we both had it on our apps and or on our phones. And so we read the original reports, and then it was like just, so I already had their information in my phone when the new ones came out. And I was so excited. Yeah. The
That's
sex
so
ones are
fun.
fun too.
I
And,
know,
like,
they really are.
really hot. Reading the sex reports for your friends is like, it's really good.
Wait,
Anyone
between
who
like
says they
friends
don't do
or-
that is lying. Like everybody reads all three. Like I'm so convinced.
But also it allows you to just choose two people, not you know, not necessarily yourself, but
Oh
just
yeah.
people you can think of.
Ooh.
You can match make in your mind.
Oh my
if you really
God.
want to.
That's so cool.
Please don't tell me I'm the only person who's done that.
Oh no.
This is revelatory.
I mean, I do that because
All
I
of
want
us
to
after
see,
this
I want to
podcast.
see more stuff that's not all about Libras, you know. So I'm just
That's
like
true.
want to read more of the content in the app. So I'll just choose two random friends and see what happens.
That's amazing.
I'm so glad you said that. I'm gonna Virgo out later.
It's
I love it.
it's the 12th house Scorpio sun in the
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my God, you're so right. Our app is built
It's a
for
little bit of-
lurking and
a little bit of lurking. Highly
that is so
sexualized
funny. Wow, I love it. Also, like I feel like chart ruler in the third is very like, I'm just gonna like scroll and just like play around in this app forever and like, you know, go all the little combinations. Jared, how about you? How did you and your partner react? Did you get her to look at it at all?
I have not gotten her to download CUSP, but I have gotten her to look at some stuff. I don't know why. That isn't not rooted in anything, but we'll have to ask her basically.
Okay.
But you know, I since I was editing all the content, I was, you know, if one of them applied, I was certainly reading it very closely.
Yeah.
And then I had the dangerous power of being able to make changes, so I tried not to do that in terms of trying to model it entirely after this one relationship that I'm living. That was always a danger if you know, writing for your own sign or anything.
Yeah.
Even if just a friend, because like I imagine we all had our own process, but probably there was some commonalities of like, I need something personal because otherwise this is never going to be grounded. Something personal-ish. If it's somebody I know, or you know, even if I'm writing about two signs, I'm no relation to me. Just like think of something or somebody that I know as a sort of starting place. You know, just putting together as many kind of different influences as you could to try to make sure it wasn't totally impersonal and it wasn't too personal. So
Yeah.
anyway,
That's really important. I mean, I don't think people realize it, like how much astrologers do that and how it actually works. Like even when I used to write dailies too, I would write them to people whose rising signs, you know, are associated with that sign, and basically kind of like thinking about what that person's going through in their life and thinking about how whatever daily transit would affect them, and it works, you know. And that's when you're writing for certain placements, like write about someone you know. And if as long as if you're a good enough astrologer to really be able to like kind of focus in on that placement, then yeah, it definitely works really well.
It's like an equal balance between predictive and reflective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if you know people's charts really well and you've looked at enough charts overall, then it gets a lot easier to sort of zoom in on one placement and sort of identify the part of that person that you want to think about.
Yeah.
And then you can kind of branch it. Like I would try to have at least, because I was working on sun sign stuff, I would just try to have at least a handful of people in mind with different charts, with different rising signs and different Mercuries and Venuses, whatever. Sometimes I would just have celebrities in my mind, or I would look up famous celebrity couples, just easier for sun sign combos. Just
Yeah.
to have
That
something.
that reminded what you were saying a little bit ago too, reminded me about like writing for your own placements and not wanting to put too much of your own experience into it. That's why I didn't write the Scorpio book for that book series, where I wrote Pisces. That's like the number one reason why I chose Pisces and not Scorpio, because I at the time especially was surrounded by Pisces, so many Pisces in my life. I'm a Pisces rising. And I felt like I had a much better like sample selection of like Pisces experience than I did Scorpio experience, because I'm like super Scorpio, like Sun, Mars, Pluto. I didn't want to put too much of my own intense Scorpionic experience into a whole book about Scorpios. Although you could also argue, since I'm such a super Scorpio, it probably would have worked. But but anyway, yeah, it's really important to sort of have other people in mind when you're doing this sort of work.
Yeah.
Job, how about you?
So I just want to quickly tag on to what you all were talking about.
Yeah.
It's so interesting too, because for so long, I was like a really insufferable, like traditional astrology student at first. And I was like really stuck up about it. Like, I'm not proud of that at all. But I was like, I'm not going to be the astrologer that writes based on my personal experience. It's all going to be technique, which is like so silly to me now.
So Virgo.
It's so I'm like, oh my God, Joe. But I was very resistant to that at first. But it's like, you need a strong technical foundation, but you need the experience of these placements through relationship, through other people, as almost like, this may be kind of the wrong word, but like, that's the empirical part. Like, that's the experiential part. And so when I was writing for CUSP, of course I was thinking about like my Scorpio moon friends and like how I get along with my Scorpio moon friends, and like the Cancer Scorpio moon compatibility was so fun to write because I love Scorpio moons, et cetera, et cetera. What?
I said, and it's the best one. It's just
I mean, it might be my favorite, but I'm biased. But what's really interesting is that I think, like you all were saying, like when you're a good writer and when you're a good astrologer, you can both have someone in mind and like write a horoscope or a report to a person. But it's like, you're asking yourself, okay, what is this person like? How is this person experiencing this transit or this, compatibility or synastry or whatever? But then you're also able to hone in on why and take that back to the technique and then take it back out. So it remains personal and it like hits, but it's really solid. Mm-hmm. And that way it's, broad is not the word I'm looking for. Impersonal is not the word I'm looking for, but it's technically sound enough to apply very widely while still having that very personal feeling where it's like, it reads like that because you know the person, because in a way you do. And I've said it before, I'm going to keep saying it. I'm so blown away by everyone's writing because it all feels like that. Like it all feels like that. And it's just, you really did a simple, like a stellar team, Kirah. It's great. But I just wanted to touch on that because I find that whole process endlessly fascinating. And I love swallowing my words from several years ago on that whole thing. Because writing based on your personal experience is part of what makes the variety and the diversity of the CUSP app and the writing contained in it so wonderful, because you get to really see and hear and feel that. But anyway, let's see. CUSP for me. I'm not partnered right now. But I definitely, I'm not talking to people and the reports and the reports. Yeah, the reports hit. There were audible gasps when I read some of them, the way they absolutely nailed us. Some were like really moving and sweet. And yeah, it's just, I'm having so much fun with it. Like, I'm not much of like an astrology app person either. It's like the same, like, kind of like slightly stuck up, like trad astrology student from 6 years ago deep inside me that's like, I don't need an app. Like I can just look at the charts.
No, I'm with you. I'm with you.
It's very silly, but it's so fun and it's so good. The content's so good. And yeah, it's like a refreshing way to step outside my astrology brain and still be getting like such excellent astrology. And the whole energy like underlying the app is so good. Like I feel the Venus on the ascendant and everything that it makes it just like a joyful experience to like be curious about this stuff and maybe lurk a little, maybe read all 3 reports for everyone as a treat, But yeah, they've been really good. They've been super accurate. Again, one of those things where I'm like, wow, you have been spying on my text messages like 100%. Like, how did you know? So it feels good to have that happen after all these years of being engaged with astrology.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I think the first one I looked at was my friendship report with my co-founder. Cause I think I forget. He commented on it to like test out the reactions feature. And I read that one and I was like, we both have Aries moons. And so I just remember reading that section about the Aries moon compatibility. And I was just like, oh, nailed it, Joe, nailed it. So yeah, awesome. I want to kind of shift a little bit and talk about like compatibility in astrology, because the way we did it in the app, there's so many different ways you could do it, and there's so many different combinations you can play with. And I feel like we started in a really solid place that gives so much depth, but to really get into like your true compatibility with another person, you need to look at the full chart. And typically that means talking to an astrologer or learning astrology, to really make sense of it. So I'm curious, like each of your sort of histories with astrology and compatibility, and the types of maybe methods you've used or techniques you've used, because we have synastry, which I guess you could just define as kind of overlaying 2 charts to see where how the planets in each chart interact with each other, and how the planets and points, and you could even say houses, interact with each other. And then we have what's called composite charts, or midpoint charts, which is when you're taking the chart data from 2 different charts and finding the midpoints of each of those planetary combinations, you could say, right? So it's like finding the midpoint between 2 people's sun, the midpoint in the zodiac, finding the midpoint between their moons, etc. And then there's different types of composite charts within that. You have the Davison chart. What others? I mean, that's kind of it, right? In terms of like ways of, and then there's kind of more archetypal ways of looking at it, where you're comparing like modality and element as well. I definitely focus on synastry mostly, and not that I do compatibility reports or anything, but when I'm looking at it, I feel like I have a very specific way of looking at compatibility, and that I kind of want to first start off by saying, like, this is how I got into astrology when I was 11 years old. Being a boy crazy, Venus and Libra little slut that I am, I wanted to know. I'm embracing the slut now that Jupiter's back in Pisces. I'm like, sluts for Jove. So yeah, I felt like when I was like around 10, 11, that's when I started to really research astrology online, and specifically compatibility. And I've always been really into it. I'm very relationship oriented in general. You know, my chart rulers on my descendant, Venus in Libra on the 8th. It's just who I am. So over the years, through doing this so much and, you know, dating different types of people and constantly looking at this stuff, and not just dating, but like just being in relationship with others, what I've kind of come down to is definitely synastry is a big piece to it. Like when your points hit my points, we're going to feel something, you know, like there's something there. And really that's what aspects are all about. It's like about that witnessing piece of, you know, activating another person through the witnessing of one planet to another. Also, angular synastry, I think, hits very, very hard. Like, it's like some of my favorite people, the people that I want to be around all the time, have their IC, or yeah, their ascendant conjunct my IC. So like IC, like any sort of angular synastry, descendant, midheaven, like anything like that really hits. And yeah, so that's kind of how, and then I also look at patterning. So if someone's chart ruler is in their 8th house and another person's chart ruler is in their 8th house, I find that to be, even if the signs aren't compatible necessarily or seeing each other, I still find that to be something that those people can relate to, right? A similar type of experience maybe. Or if someone has a ton of, you know, earth and water in their chart, like they're probably going to get along with other people with some earth and water in their chart, right? They're going to feel that sort of comfort and stability with that. Similar aspect patterns, similar, you know, stelliums are in the same houses, or if, I don't know, you just find different patterns to kind of look at. So yeah, I'm curious for you guys. Jared, do you want to start? I'm curious, like how you've done synastry or compatibility in astrology.
Yeah. Well, I've never done it. I've never worked with compatibility or synastry at like in a consultation setting, but I have obviously toyed with it quite a bit in terms of my own curiosity with astrology and thinking about my relationships and my friends and all that. And I feel like I'm probably not alone that it was one of the first things that I looked into, or that made me curious about astrology. Aside from just like being like, what's up with Libras? You know, then it was like, what's up with everybody else? That's just how it works. That's what you do. And then you start to notice how you get along with different people. But honestly, this is what I was thinking about as you were talking, is one of the first things that really hooked me into astrology, even though I had a general point of view and framework for thinking about the world that was pretty at odds with astrology, and I had really mixed feelings about the whole idea. Once I got curious enough to look up some other people's charts in a little more detail, I discovered this really striking pattern about like pretty much every person I ever dated or had a crush on, going back to like 3rd grade. And it was just this nonstop supply of Capricorn placements, especially Capricorn moons. But you know, whenever the Capricorn moon wasn't there, they were a Capricorn sun or whatever. Like, and once I noticed this, I really like it really hit me like a truck. Because it just felt, you know, this is an anecdotal experience. This is not, you know, scientifically valid as a data point, but for me as a person, it was a really strong data point that there was something to this, not only to astrology but also to synastry. It was only years later that I was in class with Austin Coppock, and he said this line about Capricorn moons, and he said, Capricorn moons nurture by not indulging. And that was the next time that I got slammed by a truck in this regard, because it was like after all these years, I sort of resolved the mystery, because I was always wondering, like, what is it that I, as a person, am looking for in these other people who have Capricorn moons, like the person I live with, you know? And that was that was something that I needed in my life. I needed to find that in myself. I feel like, without getting too personal, I had reasons. I had a sort of inner indulgence or inner self-indulgence and tendency towards self-pity, and in other people, I saw a model of acting differently. And this is, considered a detrimented moon, or arguably a weak moon. But in my life, that was something that I needed, right? So that's just like an example of how compatibility and synastry sort of plays itself out in seeing patterns in your own life. And from there, like once I started really diving into synastry, even though I don't do it for other people, when I track it in my own life, in my primary relationships in my life, my best friends and my family members and all this stuff, I think it's up there in the top 3 things that like come through with really kind of astounding results, where I see how my Mercury is on my brother's Jupiter and his Jupiter is on my Mercury, and it's like, and they're square, and it's like this perfect representation of our intellectual relationship and the way that we challenge each other and the way that we teach each other, just, and how we argue, and they're in fixed signs, and we're both really stubborn about the things we're stubborn about. That side of synastry for me is like really unbeatable in terms of what astrology has to offer. And especially because I feel like the other major thing about astrology as a practice and a philosophy that hooked me in those early years was just really like internalizing the idea that other people are different. They're different from me, and all the people I know are different from each other, and they are, I don't know why they're different. I can't trace it. I can't, explain through nature versus nurture or the stars or fate or whatever, but I do know it's true. And I do know that this framework somehow describes that. And so being able to not only understand people as individuals, but then put it all together. And really like see how my differences and your differences interact, and we awaken different parts of ourselves and change each other over time. And and like the people that just pop into your life, I'm endlessly fascinated with it. So
someone who also attracts a ton of Capricorn moons, and if not Capricorn moon, Capricorn rising placements, and if not rising then sun, but like so many. The way you put that was so, it hit me so hard. I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what I'm looking for, that too. Too much Jupiterian self-indulgence. I need someone to model that for me. That's so, wow, that was beautiful. Okay, we took a little quick break there. So that's, I mean, again, I kind of think about, when I think about our friendship, Jared, I think a lot about the fact that your Saturn's on my sun, and how much I fucking adore that synastry. Like, it feels so good for me. I always describe it as like a weighted blanket, when someone's Saturn's on your sun. I don't know how it is to have someone's sun on your Saturn. I don't know how it is for you on the other way around, but like I have that with Michael J. Morris too. And like just a lot of people from that Saturn and Scorpio cohort that like, I just like, it's such a good friendship piece, like compatibility for me. Maybe because Saturn rules my 11th, I don't know, but it feels so good for me. Pallas, how about you? How do you do compatibility stuff?
I used to do it a lot more, like in sessions with people, because I used to be a primarily in-person astrologer. And so I was like local kitchen witch. People would come over and I'd read their charts, and we'd have tea. And that's like the first couple of years of my practice. And so people eventually, so many people, especially in like the local queer community, right? It's like someone would come and then they'd tell their coworker who would tell their friend whose partner would come. And then it was like, I sort of had read for enough people that people then wanted to sort of talk about their charts together, right? And so I remember I had done individual readings for like 3 roommates, and then they came and we did like a tri-wheel synastry session, and it was amazing. Online, it doesn't have, I don't know, you can't get the same consent, right, with people. It's more complicated. So I don't often bring it up in sessions. One thing I do a lot is family synastry. And that is because I do work with ancestors and like spirits and stuff. And so sometimes if a return client comes to me and wants to look at that stuff, we'll even look at like dead people's charts, right? We kind of pull out the whole thing. And in that, the repeating signatures stuff in family is so powerful. Like you end up seeing generations of people all with Jupiter square the nodes. And you're like, I know what that inheritance is still living out, right? There's you can just see it so strongly. And of course, Saturn signatures can run often between parents and kids, right? So there's so many layers to that itself. In my personal life, I totally love synastry. The way I really think about it though is, I work a lot with transits, right? I think of transits as like collective experiences. And so the way transits interact with our chart, when there's pieces of our chart that touch pieces of another person's chart, then transits will activate those at the same time, right? And so they really, like, that's kind of what living in our synastry is like, living with the cycles of the planets around us. And it's like they can activate different points in our relationship, right? And so often if we're looking at our synastry, we can also look at the transits happening to our synastry. And that's where I think it really comes alive.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you brought up family synastry, because that's the type of shit that really excuse me, really blows a lot of people's mind when they get into astrology. And when you start seeing the family patterns, it's like, it's so wild. I mean, yeah, I remember when I first realized that, my grandmother was born on a total lunar eclipse, and no one in our family, like, she had 4 girls, they had a bunch of kids. I'm one of those kids, they have a bunch of kids. I don't think there's anyone, at least from like my level of like cousins, that has any sort of dignified moon. We have no good moon signs basically in my family. And I think that, kind of looking at my grandmother, whose moon was total eclipse, and she lost her mother at a really young age, like just that wound being carried, that like those moon problems, lots of malefic ruled moons, like me and my sister both, my mom, like, yeah. So family synastry is, oh my gosh. Now I'm like, I literally wrote it down. Like, do we need an episode on that? Cause I think so. There's just so much to get into. But all great points. Yeah. How about you, Joe?
Yeah. So, kind of opposite experience. So far, I wasn't ever super into compatibility and synastry and stuff. I was, look, I'm sorry, I'm a Leo. I have Leo rising. I was like, I need to understand myself.
Yeah.
So much. Yeah, it is what it is. But it kind of bled into my practice a little bit too. I don't offer compatibility or composite readings or consultations really, because I think there's really so much you can see in the chart of an individual as far as how they relate to others. As Pallas was saying earlier, you often see the ruler of the 7th house literally as partners and where they show up in the life, and in that person's world. So as far as my practice and, where compatibility is situated within that, it's really rooted in the individual's chart and their experience and what they can bring to relationship, and then how they can kind of work with what's received, and how whatever they receive from whatever relationship they're in with whoever it is, how that's going to hit their chart and hit them as a person, and how they can process and metabolize that. So that's how it is as far as like my my practice and how I engage with it. However, synastry is a real thing, obviously. The more you look at it, the less you can deny that this is such a real thing. And actually, thinking about this before we started recording and, while we've been chatting here, I'm trying to remember who said this. And I hope one of you can remember, because it definitely didn't come from my own brain. But someone said, essentially synastry is like a permanent transit to your chart. Like this person is like a transit to your chart. And I wish I could remember who said it, because it's so true. So I think when I first started really dabbling, I looked at it that way. Like, okay, this person's Saturn is opposite my moon. Like I'm getting a Saturn moon opposition, like transit, when I interact with and relate and engage in relationship with this person. And like, what does that mean? And what does that feel like? And I think that's kind of the way I approach it. And I definitely thought about that even just writing for CUSP. And, I think about it when I read other sorts of compatibility reports, and I can really kind of see that coming through. But yeah, it's as far as like composite charts, I do think they're really fun. I haven't delved super deeply into like Davidson charts and stuff. What I notice is like what I can kind of tease out and surmise and delineate from just looking at the synastry between two charts and like the ruler of the seventh for two charts, et cetera, et cetera. Typically things like composite charts, for me at least, tend to like ping a similar resonance and maybe like add something that's kind of something I can typically already find without like a composite chart, but maybe with an additional layer, like similar to how some practitioners layer on asteroids or layer on other sort of minor planetary bodies or heavenly bodies, etc. But yeah, it's synastry. I have to admit, like, Jared, you were talking about Capricorn moons. Like, I collect like Virgo moons and Mars in Virgo. Like, I love Virgo synastry. Obviously, I have Venus in Virgo, so like, of course, I'm like, bring me all the Virgos. Like, I love them so much. There's something so good about that for me. I think also just because like my Mercury is there and it makes the communication so good, and like every part of relationship goes more smoothly when the communication component is there. And if Virgo likes to do anything, it's communicate. And yes, it can be overdone, but it can provide some good foundations. But yeah, I think that's most of what I have to say on compatibility and synastry.
Yeah, all great points. I'm also a big Virgo moon stan. Like, it's my 7th house and my chart rulers in Virgo. So my assistant's a Virgo. I have a couple people working for me who are Virgo moons. Like, this person I was seeing for the past couple, year and a half. Oh, so nourishing. Yeah, I would say when like good planets like the moon and like benefics and like the sun especially, or luminaries, I should say, especially when they fall in your 7th, it's nice. It's like they're lighting up partnership for you. They're lighting up that part of you that wants to connect. And that's how I feel about Virgo placements. ET, how about you? I know you've done composite charts because you're the person that got me into looking at them.
Yeah. Wow, I want to echo so much of what everyone has already said too. I actually got into astrology, I think, because of synastry. Like, obviously, I was interested in what it said about me, but mostly I was interested in what it said about my relationship to other people. And I have a very like relationship oriented chart. Like, my nodes are in the 1st and 7th. And so I see that a lot playing out. And I looked at everything. I mean, I've looked at like Venus compatibility, moon compatibility, sun compatibility, like ruler of the 7th, ruler of the 1st, ruler of the 10th, ruler of the 2nd and 8th. And I'm like constantly looking at how people are in relationship to one another. in a consultation setting, I haven't done a ton of couples sessions because of a number of reasons. And I've never advertised it publicly. I've only worked with people who I had as individual clients first, who then came back and requested it. And even then, only people who I'd worked with a number of times where I could like trust that that was a safe space to do that. And the reason that I don't work with couples is that I think it requires like an enormous amount of energetic labor and care to treat that with the responsibility that it necessitates to be holding space for couples. And, you know, that's like CUSP on just a whole nother level, because you're holding space with people who may be trying to work through some pretty difficult material. And maybe someday I'll come to that again, but on a personal level, I'm constantly looking at relationships between charts. And the thing that I'm looking for, I would echo what Joe has said, is like, I want to look first at who two different people are individually. Like, I'm never going to look at synastry between two charts without first understanding the individual behind each chart. And I have Uranus on the ascendant. And so when I'm looking at synastry, I'm looking at how free do these people feel able to be themselves in relationship to one another? Like, how at ease do they feel being fully themselves? And does the chart of the other person mirror them enough or create a container that allows them to be as like fully expressed as they possibly could be? And usually nobody's going to be like a perfect match, right? But usually the place that I'm going to start is, where is the ruler of the first? Where is the ruler of the seventh? How are they relating to one another in an individual's chart? And then how are they relating? Like, how is one person's ruler of the first relating to the other person's ruler of the first? How is one person's ruler of the seventh relating to the other person's ruler of the seventh? And where in the chart is that? So I'm looking at like house sign, house ruler, like so many different pieces. And usually I can tell. So like if the ruler of the seventh is in like a Jupiterian rule, is in Pisces or Sagittarius, I know that that person is going to be looking for a partner who has like very strong Jupiterian influences. Or if the ruler of the seventh is in a Venus ruled sign, Taurus or Libra, they're going to be looking for a partner who has strong Venus significations. And that could show up in so many different ways. That could show up as like Venus conjunct the sun, Venus conjunct the ascendant, Libra rising, Taurus rising, like Libra sun, Taurus sun. Like it could be so many, or even like the ruler of the chart conjunct Venus somewhere.
In the midheaven. Yeah,
exactly. Like there's so many different ways that it can show up. And I love that, because it's not narrow. It's not like, oh, you're looking for someone who has like a Pisces sun in the 8th house conjunct, Pluto. Like, no, it's so much more complicated than that. But then, I'll get into some of the more specifics, like Venus compatibility, moon compatibility. I love looking at like Sun, Mars, Sun, Venus, like basically whatever the sectolite is with all of the other planets, and trying to get a sense of how those people are, how they fight is a big one, like how they protect themselves, how and what they need to feel safe. Also, like where the ruler of the first is going to tell me a lot about who someone is. So for example, like the ruler of my first is in the second. So I like values are really important to me. And the ruler of my seventh is sextile my chart ruler. So I'm going to be looking for a partner who also has a very like strong relationship to their values. It can come up in so many different ways. And then there's like the fun stuff of like, for example, if you have gotten into like astro mapping, astrolocality, like my partner and myself both have Venus lines through each other's like not necessarily ancestral, like her Venus line is through my hometown and my Venus line is through her like grandparents' hometown. And like, that was really fun to discover. So there's like so many different pieces that you can look at. Composite charts are really interesting because they define the quality of the relationship. So it sort of, it zooms out and it zooms out from like the individuals and in on what is this connection. And just like reading a natal chart, I'm going to start by entering the, like at the ascendant. So like what's happening on the ascendant, what's ruling the ascendant. Are there any planets on the ascendant? For example, I had an ex, our composite chart had Pluto on the ascendant, and that relationship just like could not come out of like the cave of what felt like incredible, like aching pain, and like really wanted it to work, maybe to an obsessive extent. You know, Pluto and
That was
Scorpio on the
painful
ascendant will, like,
for
do
us who had to watch you move through that too.
I'm like so glad I did, but
Yeah,
it's nice to look at composites to get a sense of like, what is the relationship about and what does it need. But ultimately, I'm, you know, when I'm looking at synastry, I'm going to be looking at the two separate charts, more so than the composite. Like the composite is like a big, it'll illuminate what the struggles are and where the ease is very quickly. Mm-hmm. But the solutions are usually found in the two people's charts as they relate to one another. And what you're really looking for there is like, what does this one individual need, and can this other person give that to them, and vice versa.
Mm-hmm. So well said.
I could go on, but you know.
No, yeah, that's so well said. I mean, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say another thing about composite charts, but I can do that.
No. I mean, you can. I was just going to say, I just love driving home the point that it is so much about the individual charts, like, which is why I think CUSP does such a good job of too, because it's not so much reliant on like relationship or like what you can do for this other person even, or what you can do to, you know, be better in a relationship or whatever. It's really about how do you relate to another person, and how can you figure out how to relate to each other based on who you are as individuals. Pallas, what were you going to say about composite charts?
I like composite charts. I think they're really strange and beautiful. And yeah, like from my psych background, they definitely, like what Erin was saying, they look at the composite chart as like a third thing, right? Where it's like there's two individuals, and then the composite chart is the chart of the relationship of this like third thing that exists between you. And like I do tend to think of that. And so I like the chart because it's like, what kind of field do people create between each other? And like, how can they tend to that, right? And so the chart really does say something like that. But one thing, you can't just like, well, okay, I think that you can't just like look at a composite chart and read it like a natal chart, which is what some like more beginner people to compatibility tend to do. Because composites are based on midpoints, you kind of have to feel into what midpoints even mean in your own chart. Like they're really mystical, right? Mm-hmm. There's like a really mysterious aspect to midpoints and how they work. Versus a Davison chart, which is based on an actual place and time that existed, right? They tend to be descriptive of very like almost environmental, locational aspects of a relationship. Mm-hmm. And so they can be really, really tangible and note really strange things. But once again, they do tend to map like this third thing. And it's like then mapping a composite chart or a Davison chart into synastry with a natal chart, right? And that's where you get into the weeds. It's so, you know, taking it slowly and leaning into kind of the mystery of it, I think is helpful rather than attaching any like prescriptive meaning to these things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think when I'm looking at composites, it sort of reminds me of how you could learn as much in an initial astrology session as you might learn in 10 sessions of therapy. Mm-hmm. And so the composite is like similar for like a couples reading. It's like it will illuminate like the tough points, and the obviously without getting like prescriptive, you want to ask people questions. Like I would never go into a couple session or like an individual session like assuming so much about a person, because that's really dangerous. You want to like have a conversation. And at the same time, it gives you like insight on what questions to ask, or about what parts of their relationship might experience just like tension or ease, or what feels really good or what feels really hard. And that can get lit up by a composite chart very quickly, so that you can then move into, well, how do we support these two people in relationship to each other?
Beautiful. To close this out a little bit, I want to do something kind of fun and go around and talk about your favorite synastry aspects that you've experienced. Like, and specifically, I'm curious about your favorite synastry aspects when it comes to sex, friendship. Let's do sex and friendship. But I'll start. My bestie Teddy and I have the best synastry. Their sun is on my moon and their moon is on my sun. So I'm a Scorpio sun, Aries moon. They're an Aries sun, Scorpio moon. We just have this luminary synastry that we just light each other up. We just can't get enough of each other, sort of thing. We also have that their ascendants on my IC. So that's another really fun one. But yeah, luminary synastry, I think it's unbeatable. Like I love me in Scorpio moon. All my clients the past 2 days have all been Scorpio moons. And I just love that, the light in me sees the light in you sort of thing. And I think when it's sun moon, especially, it's a very specific type of, giving and receiving that happens that can be really special. In sex synastry, I had sex with someone so I have Venus and Mars in domicile, right? I have Venus in Libra, Mars in Scorpio. I had the pleasure of having sex with someone with also Venus and Mars in domicile and the other signs. So Venus in Taurus and Mars in Aries. So our Venuses and Mars were opposing each other's. It was fun. I'll just say that. That was really fun. Domiciled Venus and Mars. Yeah, get you one of those. We're really fun. Pallas, how about you?
For any type of relationship.
Yeah, you can do any type.
I'm a Sag rising, and honestly, I love other Sag risings.
Hell
like,
yeah.
I'm sorry. Like, we're great. My partner's a Sag rising. I've dated so many Sag rising.
I love that.
There's
CUSP
like
a Sag rising.
Yeah, I think I actually have the moon's at 23, right?
In the CUSP chart?
Yeah.
Venus is at 23. Venus is at 23
okay.
Sag. The moon's in
then that's my
Leo.
moon.
Okay. Oh, perfect.
Yeah, right. So I love that. And this is for friendships. And this is one thing I've actually seen just happen. And then I'm like, what is that? And then I notice it. And now, of course, I notice it. But one of the things about friendships is I tend to actually like this like dark house synastry, because it actually pulls out things. It pulls out things so we can see them from another person, right? And so it's like people with Scorpio placements kind of pull out my Scorpio placements, and so I can kind of see them, right? Cancer placements, my 8th house placements, and they kind of like Taurus placements, right? They pull these things out that I can't really see about myself otherwise. That's probably my favorite thing about that. And then, yeah, I think like oppositions are like the sexual tension aspect. I love them.
Yeah,
for sure.
So true.
Yeah, oppositions. I'm very into them.
Yeah. Ooh, hell yeah to that. Joe, how about you?
Nodding so much to oppositions are the sexual tension aspect. 100%.
It really is.
Yeah. Let's see. I also love what you said about like dark house synastry, Pallas, like just with any relationship. And it reminds me of something I feel like I've meant to say like 3 times before this, but having like I have a strong moon in domicile, but it's in the 12th house. So it's just like really good at doing 12th house things, which are like really not good. It's a tough placement. It's not a bad placement, but it's tough. And I find that like other afflicted moons, kind of in any kind of relationship, there's like this deep connection on that because there's an understanding of like what that means. So like Scorpio moons, because it's a fellow water moon. I find the same thing with my Venus placement and people with Venus in detriment or fall or in a dark house or something. There's a similar kind of understanding of the challenges of connection that allow like a vulnerability that comes from being able to be like, I totally get it. Like I relate to you on that. I'm so sorry. I have a space heater that's beeping and I don't know why. That was a weird sound. But yeah, so as far as friendship goes, I mean, I already mentioned I'm a slut for Virgos. I'm kind of just a slut for Virgos anyways, Virgo placements, but also fire synastry. Like I can't help it. I have a fire ascendant and a fire sun. Like I have the most fun with people with just good fire luminaries or like fire anything. It's just pure fun. Like
Lights
I just
you
get
up.
louder than I already am. Yeah. Just like, oh no, prepare for me to be very loud. But yeah, as far as sex goes, that's the oppositions for me. It's the oppositions.
It's always the oppositions. And I will say squares too. Squares, Mars squares.
It's the tension. Yeah.
Mars squares. I'm just thinking like all the people I've had sex with in the past year have Mars square mine and hits. I don't know.
Yeah. That's all I'll say.
Erin, how about you?
Oh man, I feel like I could go so many different directions. I love Sun Mars. I have like, and sometimes I wonder if it's Sun Mars or if it's just like my Venus in a Mars ruled sign, loving like
Martian.
People who are super Martian, but like all of my partners, most of my best friends have Mars and Scorpio. You among them. And when I think about, I see a lot of like Mars and Scorpio, Venus and Libra placements, like people who have that double. And I have Sun Pisces, Venus Aries. And so it's like, there's something about that combination that like really hits for me, both in friendship and in like romance and sex. For friendship, for sure, fire moons, mostly Sag and Aries moons. Like so many of my best friends have Sag or Aries moons. And I think it's something about, so I have a Sag moon in the 12th house, and like there's something about the ability to just like vent and like have somebody else understand that you just need to vent. You just need to let it out. And they sort of like egg you on. And then at the same time, when you're like partying, it's very like, I don't know what the word is, like maybe not boisterous, but there's like a gregarity or like gregariousness.
Just
I don't know.
Dumb and fun.
Just being able to just like, wing it and sort of say fuck it. And that it's like there's a lot of ease there with other fire moons. And then the last one for me, the last one for me for sex is definitely, I don't know what it is. I think it's because so I have Mars and Gemini and Sun square Mars, and like Gemini placements just get me every time. It's like weird, kinky, goodness.
Yes. Yes.
I don't know. It's like, I think for me, it's everybody's like, it's the oppositions for me. I'm like, it's the squares for me. It's the conjunctions.
I think it's the squares. I mean, I hear that. I have basically only had sex with Geminis in the past 2 years. So I hear there's some, and for me, I think it's, my chart rulers in Virgo have Mercury and Sag, and like, I just cannot get enough of these Gemini placements. Whew, it's the oppositions and the squares. I mean, that's what makes shit happen,
Mhm.
I will also say conjunctions too, can make shit happen, but moons, you need moon sign friends of the same element, basically. Like fire moons need each other, water moons need each other. It's a thing. Air moons definitely need each other. And earth moons, you also need each other to like ground yourselves, basically, for after dealing with the rest of us. Jared, how about you?
I feel like too much of a Libra to answer this question. I'm like, everyone. I would say I guess I've already spoken about my attachment to Capricorn moons, so I'll just leave that there. Definitely all Virgo placements. I have so many spots in Virgo to make synastry with, so it doesn't take much. I meet somebody with a Virgo placement, I'm like, hi, I love you.
Same. Heartily.
And Scorpio also, because I have so many things in Scorpio. Sometimes it brings up stuff I don't want to look at, but it's good nonetheless. I have, at some point I noticed that one of my dearest friends and my therapist have the same birthday, and it's right on my Mercury. So, and Hillary Clinton.
Oh, it's my dad's birthday.
Yeah.
And that's also where, sorry. Never mind.
Yeah.
I also just want to,
No, go ahead.
I just want to give a moment to Mars and Capricorn, period.
Oh,
Like,
100%.
Yeah.
Hot stuff.
Yeah.
Also, like other like I'm a Cap rising, but like Cap for Cap 100.
I thought you were gonna say that, Erin.
I don't know why I didn't. That was dumb.
Yeah, people with your same rising sign.
Yeah.
That also is like it hits. Sorry, Jared.
Jared, sorry, we could totally cut you off.
I thought maybe I was going to get off the hook for the next part of the question, which, in fact, I'm going to respectfully decline.
That's fine. That is fine.
I'll just say it's enough for me to go on a podcast and talk about astrology. It's enough for my Mercury in Scorpio conjunct Pluto.
Yeah, dark house luminaries. I get it.
Declining to indulge.
Yeah, there you go.
I finally learned.
I want to thank you guys so much for coming on here and indulging us on Valentine's Day to talk about, the app, CUSP, relationships, love, compatibility, fun, all the things. We have nothing else to do except tell the people where they can find you. Jared, why don't you start us off?
Okay. You will find me in terms of social media, mostly on Twitter, where my handle is Mercurious George. Mercurious spelled with an I-U-S, no O. And my website is mercuriousgeorge.com, and I offer consultations, and I've done a little bit of writing, and I keep thinking I'm going to do more. So hopefully by Valentine's Day, I'll finally write something and put it there.
Awesome. Thank you. And Erin?
I'm at ET, like extraterrestrial, ET Shipley, ship like a boat, Ley, on virtually all the socials, Instagram, Twitter, and my website is etshipley.com. And I also have a newsletter that is like fairly irregular at this point because, as Kirah mentioned, I have a fiance and I'm planning a wedding, and that is a whole thing in a pandemic. So sessions are the best place to find me if you want to work one-on-one.
Awesome. Joe?
All right. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram, doing plenty of trolling and shit posting in between occasional insightful astrological stuff at Joe Maker of Ways. It's exactly like it sounds, Joe with no E, Maker of Ways. And you can find me at joemakerofways.com. I am working on redoing my website during the present Mercury and Venus retrograde as we're recording this. So consults are still closed for now, but the best way to know when they're open is my mailing list, which is very infrequent and basically just to let people know when my consults are open. You can sign up on my website. But yeah, that's what I got.
Awesome. And Pallas.
My website is nineofwands.com, and you can find webinars and events. And I'll be opening when this is released, I'll be opening some first time one-on-one sessions pretty soon after this is released. I'm on Twitter and Instagram, and you can find some of my writing at patreon.com/nineofwands, and that supports specifically writing, research and writing of a book I'm finishing on the IC. Yeah.
Awesome. And we're going to do a whole episode on the IC with Pallas and Taylor Ursula coming up soon.
Excited.
So I'm excited for that too. And yeah, thank you all again for being a part of CUSP, being part of this episode. So grateful.